Holt Delaney had been hauling freight through the Galactic hub station Ophiuchus 6 for 8 months now, and in that time she'd learned exactly 3 important facts about interstellar commerce. 1. Never trust a Quellan trader who color shifts to purple during negotiations. 2. The coffee substitute they sold at the station kiosks tasted like burnt rubber mixed with regret. And 3. Humans were, according to literally everyone else in the galaxy, basically the cosmic equivalent of wet paper bags when it came to physical capability. Adorable little things, those Earthborn, she'd overheard a Haxalite cargo master say once, patting her on the head like she was a particularly clever dog. Smart enough, but built like decorative flowers. One good wind and poof! Holt hadn't argued. Why would she? Compared to the 8-foot warriors of the Kulgrim Empire, or the 6-armed Quellan laborers who could lift 3 times their body weight, or even the Haxalites with their reinforced exoskeletons, humans did seem kind of squishy, fragile. The new kids on the Galactic block who'd only figured out faster-than-light travel about a decade ago and were still reading the instruction manual. So there she stood in Customs Bay 19, waiting for her cargo clearance like a good little Earthborn, filling out digital forms on her datapad, and trying not to think about how the station's recycled air always smelled faintly of ozone and something that might have been alien body odor but could also have been decomposing lunch meat. Hard to tell, really. That's when the alarms started. Not the gentle, "Please proceed to the nearest exit" alarms. Not even the minor hull breach, "Don't panic" alarms. These were the full-blown red rotating lights. Everyone is going to die screaming alarms that made Holt's coffee substitute slosh out of its container and onto her jumpsuit. "Attention, all station personnel and visitors," the station AI announced in that perfectly calm voice that somehow made everything worse. Station Ophiuchus 6 is now under Level 9 lockdown. All individuals must remain in current locations. Compliance is mandatory. Resistance will be met with... The AI cut off mid-sentence, which, in Holt's limited experience with station emergencies, was a really bad sign. The other beings in the customs bay, a mix of traders, tourists, and one very nervous-looking Kelon who'd been trying to smuggle exotic fungi in his luggage, all froze. Then they started moving toward the exits in that particular way that suggested panic was about 3 seconds away from turning into a stampede. Holt grabbed her datapad and cargo manifest, because even during potential station catastrophes, you didn't abandon your paperwork. 8 months of hauling freight had taught her that much. She was halfway to the exit when the bulkhead doors slammed shut with a pneumatic hiss that sounded way too final for comfort. "Okay," she muttered to herself, watching as the other beings in the bay started frantically tapping at door controls that were very obviously not responding. "Okay, this is fine. This is totally fine. Probably just a drill. A very realistic, terrifying drill that..." The explosion came from somewhere above them, muffled by layers of station infrastructure but still strong enough to rattle the deck plating under Holt's boots. Dust, or what passed for dust in a space station, drifted down from the ceiling panels. One of the Haxalites, a blue-shelled individual wearing what looked like expensive merchant robes, turned to Holt with all 6 of his eyes wide with terror. "Kulgrim," he whispered, his translator chip rendering the word in standard Galactic with undertones of pure dread. "Kulgrim," Holt repeated, searching her mental database of species she'd encountered. "The warrior empire people? The ones with the really intense honor codes and the reinforced skeletal structures," the Haxalite interrupted, backing away from the door. "And the monomolecular blades, and the combat reflexes that are 3 times faster than most carbon-based life forms. Yes, Those, Kulgrim. Another explosion, closer this time. Through the transparent aluminum windows of the customs bay, Holt could see beings running through the station corridors, not in an orderly evacuation, but in that primal, screaming kind of fleeing that suggested something very large and very angry was chasing them. Why would Kulgrim warriors attack a neutral trade station? Holt asked, because her brain apparently decided that getting all the facts was more important than, say, figuring out how to not die in the next 5 minutes. They don't attack, a new voice said. Holt turned to see the Quellan smuggler, his forearms nervously rearranging the contents of his pockets. They hunt. Word on the feeds is that some political defector from their empire is hiding somewhere on Ophiuchus 6. The Kulgrim don't do subtle extractions. They just board, and anyone who gets in their way. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The bulkhead door to Customs Bay 19 suddenly dented inward. Not a lot, maybe an inch, but enough to show that something on the other side had hit it with considerable force. Then it dented again, and again. Each impact sent reverberations through the floor that Holt could feel in her teeth. "Oh, that's not good," she said, which was possibly the understatement of her relatively short spacefaring career. The door's locking mechanism sparked, failed, and then the entire bulkhead peeled open like someone was opening a particularly stubborn tin can, which, Holt supposed, was exactly what was happening. Standing in the doorway, and she had to look up to see all of him, was a Kulgrim warrior in full combat armor. He was massive, 8 feet of corded muscle and natural carbon fiber bone plating, with 4 arms ending in hands that could probably crush a human skull like a grape. His face was almost reptilian, with ridge-plated skin that looked like it could deflect small arms fire, and eyes that glowed with a faint bioluminescence that her xenobiology textbooks had mentioned was a Kulgrim threat display. Behind him, 7 more warriors filed into the customs bay, each one just as terrifyingly huge and well-armed as the first. The beings in the customs bay did the smart thing. They dropped to the floor, hands or appendages or tentacles, depending on species, raised in surrender. The Haxilite merchant was actually crying, making these little chittering sounds that his translator chip didn't even bother trying to convert to standard Galactic. Holt, unfortunately, was standing too far from the group to quickly drop with them. She was, in fact, standing directly in the lead Kulgrim warrior's line of sight, holding a datapad and wearing a jumpsuit with a coffee stain on it, looking about as threatening as a particularly confused houseplant. The warrior's eyes, bright yellow with vertical pupils, locked onto her. He pulled out a small device from his belt, some kind of bioscanner, and pointed it at Holt. The device beeped. Then it displayed something on its screen that made the warrior's expression shift from intimidating to amused. He started laughing. Not a little chuckle. A full, deep, booming laugh that echoed through the customs bay and made his armor rattle. The other Kulgrim warriors glanced at each other, clearly confused about what their leader found so hilarious. "Earthborn," the lead warrior said, his translator chip rendering his words with a thick, growling accent. He held up the bioscanner so the other warriors could see. The database flagged her as Earthborn. The other Kulgrim warriors started laughing too. One of them actually slapped his knee, which was apparently a universal gesture for "this is comedy gold." Holt felt her face flush with embarrassment and also a growing sense of dread. Being laughed at by 8-foot murder machines wasn't exactly on her list of fun Friday activities. "I'm just here to pick up cargo," she said, raising her hands slowly. "Plasma coils, scheduled delivery to Proxima Station. I have all the paperwork. Everything's legal and—" "Earthborn," the lead warrior repeated, stepping closer. His boots made heavy metallic clangs on the deck plating. Your species has been in our database for, what, 8 of your cycles? 9? Little soft things with decent brains, but bodies like... He searched for a comparison. Like food packaging. Weak. Breakable. Harmless. I mean, I wouldn't say harmless, Holt started, because her survival instincts were apparently on vacation. We invented nuclear weapons and reality TV, so... The warrior pulled out his blade. It was beautiful in the way that instruments of death sometimes are, a monomolecular edge that caught the station's lights and split them into rainbow refraction patterns. The kind of weapon that could slice through station bulkheads like they were made of tissue paper. I am Drakmoth, the warrior announced, of the Kulgrim 3rd Hunting Fleet. I think I will make an example of the Earthborn. Show the others what happens when they... He swung the blade at Holt's head. Not to kill her, she realized in the fraction of a second before impact. The angle was wrong for a killing blow. He was going to stop it just short of her face, scare her into dropping to the floor with the others, humiliate her in front of everyone. A demonstration of dominance, a show of power. Holt's hand moved before her brain caught up with what she was doing. She caught the blade between her index finger and thumb. Just caught it. Like someone might catch a falling pen, or a tossed ball, or any other everyday object that wasn't a molecular-sharp blade swung by an 8-foot warrior with 4 arms' worth of muscle behind it. The blade stopped. Complete silence. Drakmoth's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked an awful lot like fear. Holt stared at her own hand, at the blade held motionless between her fingers, at the complete impossibility of what had just happened. The blade should have sliced through her fingers, through her hand, through her arm, through pretty much everything in its path. But it hadn't. It had just stopped. Holt said, because eloquence had completely abandoned her. So, this is weird, right? This is definitely weird. Drakmoth tried to pull the blade free. His muscles strained. His armor creaked with the effort. The blade didn't budge. It was held as firmly as if it had been welded between Holt's fingers. The other Kulgrim warriors, previously relaxed and amused, shifted into combat-ready stances. Weapons appeared from holsters and sheaths. The temperature in the customs bay seemed to drop about 10 degrees. "What are you?" Drakmoth whispered, his voice barely above a breath. Holt looked at her hand again, at the impossible grip she had on a weapon that should have killed her, at the 8 Kulgrim warriors, who were now looking at her like she was the dangerous one in this scenario. "I'm a logistics coordinator," she said weakly. "I have a certification in interstellar freight management and a really unfortunate habit of being in the wrong place at the wrong time." The station AI chose that moment to flicker back to life, its voice crackling through damaged speakers. "Warning! Unprecedented physical anomaly detected in Customs Bay 19. Security teams are advised to..." Drakmoth yanked his blade again, putting all 4 arms into the effort. Holt, startled by the sudden pull, let go. The warrior stumbled backward, nearly falling, catching himself with his lower 2 arms. He stared at his blade, then at Holt, then back at his blade like it had personally betrayed him. "I'm really sorry," Holt said, backing toward the wall. "I don't know what just happened. I didn't mean to. It was just reflex. I saw the blade and my hand just moved and..." "Kill her," Drakmoth ordered, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion that might have been rage or might have been terror. Possibly both. "Kill the Earthborn. Now." And that's when Holt Delaney, logistics coordinator and certified freight manager, did the only sensible thing a human could do when faced with 8 homicidal alien warriors in an enclosed space. She ran. Holt had always considered herself a decent runner. Back on Earth, she'd done the occasional 5K charity run, finished middle of the pack, never broken any records. Perfectly average cardiovascular fitness for a woman in her late 20s who spent most of her time sitting in cargo ship cockpits. So when she burst through the customs bay door, the one that had taken Drachmoth and his monomolecular blade about 30 seconds to cut through, and into the main corridor, she wasn't expecting to move quite so fast, or to accidentally rip the door frame off the wall when she grabbed it to pivot around the corner. "Oh, hell!" she gasped, staring at the twisted metal in her hand for half a second, before dropping it and sprinting down the corridor. Behind her, she could hear the heavy footfalls of Kullgrim warriors, the clang of their armor, and what sounded like very creative cursing in at least 3 different languages. The station corridors blurred past her. She'd run through Ophiuchus 6 dozens of times during cargo transfers, but never like this. Never with her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her skull. Never with 8 warriors who could apparently be killed by her, just touching them the wrong way, chasing her through. Wait. Holt's brain, which had been mostly occupied with the whole "don't die" thing, suddenly caught up with what had just happened. She'd stopped a monomolecular blade, with 2 fingers, a blade that could cut through reinforced station bulkheads. She'd stopped it like it was a plastic butter knife. That wasn't possible. That wasn't even remotely within the realm of human capability. Except she'd done it. A blast of energy fire scorched the wall next to her head, snapping her attention back to the immediate problem of not getting vaporized. Holt dove sideways through an open doorway, rolled. When had she learned to roll like that? And came up, running through what looked like a maintenance corridor. The corridor ended at a security door. Heavy duty. The kind that required either proper authorization codes or a hydraulic override system to open. A bright red warning label in 6 languages helpfully informed her that unauthorized access would result in immediate detention. Holt hit the door with her shoulder, intending to maybe hide behind it or find a control panel or literally anything other than what actually happened. The security door exploded outward off its hinges, sailed through the air, and crashed into a railing on the level below with a sound, like a small car accident. Holt stood in the doorway, staring at where the door used to be, breathing hard. "Okay," she said to no one in particular. "Okay, that's not normal. That's definitely not normal." Behind her, the Kullgrim warriors burst into the maintenance corridor. Drachmoth was in the lead, his weapon raised, his eyes wide with something that looked less like fury and more like existential dread. Holt ran. She found herself on a catwalk overlooking one of the station's main trading floors. Below, hundreds of beings were evacuating in chaotic waves, streaming toward emergency shuttle bays. Station security, a mix of species she couldn't identify from this distance, had taken up positions at various choke points, looking very much like they were preparing to make a heroic last stand. Except when the Kullgrim warriors appeared on other catwalks and lower levels, the security forces just stood down, put their weapons on the ground, backed away with their hands raised. Nobody fought Kullgrim and won. That was apparently a universal truth. Holt needed to get down to the trading floor. The catwalk she was on connected to a series of stairs about 20 meters away, but the warriors were closing in from that direction. Below her, the floor was maybe 15 feet down. Too far to jump. She'd break both legs, probably her spine, definitely. She jumped, and landed in a 3-point crouch that she'd only ever seen in action movies, deck plating cracking under her boots with a sound like breaking ice. What? She whispered, staring at the spiderweb pattern of fractures spreading from where she'd landed. What is happening to me? A chunk of debris from the shattered security door chose that moment to fall from above. Holt's hand shot out, caught it, a piece of reinforced steel the size of a dinner plate, and her fingers dented the metal where she gripped it. She dropped it, like it had burned her. A small crowd of evacuating beings had stopped to stare at her. A Kellan youngster, no more than 3 feet tall with skin that shimmered pale blue with curiosity, pointed at her with one of its 4 arms. "Are you a warrior?" the child asked, in perfectly translated Standard Galactic. "No," Holt said, backing away from the crowd. "No, I'm really not. I'm nobody. I'm normal. Something grabbed the back of her jumpsuit and yanked her sideways into a maintenance alcove with enough force that her boots left skid marks on the deck plating. Holt spun, fists raised. When had she made fists? And found herself face to face with a Quellan who barely came up to her chest. 4 arms, skin shifting rapidly through shades of green and orange in a pattern that suggested extreme excitement. Eyes like black marbles that seemed to be analyzing everything about her at once. "Oh, beautiful chaos incarnate," the Quellan said, their voice rapid-fire and delighted. "You're Earthborn. Actually Earthborn. Do you have any idea what you are?" "A freight hauler having the worst day of her life?" Holt offered. "No, the Quellan said, pulling out a datapad and frantically typing with 2 arms while the other 2 gestured wildly. "You're walking proof that the entire galactic database is catastrophically miscalibrated. You're a miracle of evolutionary biology. You're, by the 6 moons of Quell, they're coming. Come on." The Quellan grabbed Holt's hand and pulled her deeper into the maintenance bay. Despite being maybe 70 pounds soaking wet, the little alien moved with the confidence of someone who knew every hidden pathway in the station. "Who are you?" Holt asked, ducking under a low-hanging pipe. "Umbridge," the Quellan said. "Station mechanic, unauthorized modification specialist, and apparently your only friend right now. I've been watching the security feeds. The whole station has been watching the security feeds. You stopped a Kulgrim blade with 2 fingers. I didn't mean to." "Obviously you didn't mean to. You didn't even know you could." Umbridge pulled her into a small chamber filled with humming machinery and sealed the door behind them. "Because nobody told you. Because nobody knew. Because the database is wrong." "The database?" "The Galactic Species Database," Umbridge said, pulling up screens on their datapad. "Every spacefaring species gets catalogued. Physical capabilities, environmental requirements, threat assessment. When Earth made first contact, your people filled out the forms, submitted biological samples, the whole protocol. And you got classified as Class 2 sentience. Moderate intelligence, low physical capability, standard gravity world, minimal threat level." "That sounds about right," Holt said. "It's catastrophically wrong," Umbridge said, their skin flashing bright orange with emphasis. "The database listed Earth as 1.0 standard gravity units. Do you know what that means? That Earth has normal gravity?" "No!" Umbridge practically shouted. "That's the problem. The standard gravity unit was calibrated by the Quellons, my species. We evolved on a 0.4 G world. Most spacefaring species evolved on planets between 0.3 and 0.6. The Haxilites are 0.5. The Kulgrim are 0.6. When we created the database, we set our gravity as the baseline and called it 1.0 standard." Holt's brain was starting to catch up. "So, when Earth submitted our gravity as 1.0, you were using the actual measurement, actual Earth gravity, which translates to roughly 2.5 standard units on the real scale. Umbridge's skin had gone a pale, shocked yellow. Earth is a high-gravity death world, and you people have been walking around the galaxy, living and working in what is, to you, about 40% of your home gravity. You're essentially in low G all the time, and you don't even notice. Holt sat down hard on a tool chest. So I'm not... I mean, on Earth, I'm not strong. I'm actually kind of average. Maybe below average. I failed my physical fitness test in high school. On Earth, you're average, Umbridge agreed. Out here, you're a walking disaster. Every human in space is essentially a super soldier who doesn't know it yet. The maintenance bay door shuddered as something hit it from the outside. Once, twice. They found us, Umbridge said unnecessarily. Holt stood up, and the tool chest crumpled slightly under where she'd been sitting. She stared at it, then at her hands, then at Umbridge. I don't want to hurt anyone. Then don't, Umbridge said. But those Colgrim out there? They've taken hostages in Docking Bay 12. Station Administrator Bix just broadcasted. 23 beings, including a group of youngsters on a field trip. The Warriors are demanding the station hand you over. If you don't surrender in... Umbridge checked their datapad. 18 minutes. They start executing hostages. Holt's stomach dropped. Then I have to turn myself in. Or, Umbridge said, skin shifting to a determined purple, you could actually use what Earth gave you and do something about it. I'm not a fighter, Holt said, pacing in the small maintenance chamber. Every step left faint impressions in the deck plating. I don't know combat. I've never even been in a real fight. Back on Earth, I once got punched in a bar, and I just cried and left. You don't need to be a fighter, Umbridge said, pulling out various tools from storage compartments and tossing them to Holt. Catch. Holt's hands moved automatically, snatching 3 different objects out of the air simultaneously. A wrench, a calibration device, and something that looked like a space-age screwdriver. She hadn't even thought about it. Her hands had just known where the objects would be. Your reaction time, Umbridge said, skin flashing an impressed green. It's insane. Throw that wrench at the wall, hard as you can. I don't want to break. Just do it. Holt threw the wrench. It embedded itself 3 inches deep into the reinforced metal wall, with a sound like a gunshot. The handle stuck out, quivering. They both stared at it. Okay, Holt said quietly. Okay, I could kill someone. If I'm this strong, if I'm this fast, I could actually kill someone without meaning to. Which is why you're not going to fight them, Umbridge said, retrieving the wrench with considerable effort, using all 4 arms to yank it free. You're going to do something much more psychologically devastating. What? You're going to walk in there, completely peaceful, hands up, the very picture of cooperation. And when they try to restrain you, when they try to stop you, you're just going to not be stopped. Umbridge's skin rippled with colors that might have been excitement, or might have been delight at the sheer audacity of the plan. You're going to walk those hostages out of that docking bay, and the Colgrim are going to learn a very important lesson about assumptions. Holt looked at her hands again, flexing her fingers. What if I mess up? What if I accidentally hurt one of the hostages? You won't, Umbridge said with absolute certainty. You've been living in low G for 8 months, and you haven't accidentally killed anyone yet. You've clearly got excellent proprioception. Your brain knows exactly how much force to use. It's just that the baseline for not very much force is different for you than it is for everyone else. The maintenance bay door shuddered again, harder this time. Voices came through, Kulgrim voices, arguing about whether to cut through or find another entrance. 15 minutes until they start with the hostages, Umbridge said, checking the station-wide broadcast on their datapad. Bix is trying to negotiate, but Kulgrim don't really do negotiation. It's kind of against their whole warrior culture thing. Holt made a decision. She walked to the maintenance bay door, took a breath, and opened it. 3 Kulgrim warriors stood on the other side, weapons raised. They looked surprised that the door had simply opened instead of requiring them to break through it. "Hi," Holt said, raising her hands. "I'm turning myself in. Take me to Drakmoth. But I want to see the hostages first. I want to make sure they're okay." The warriors looked at each other, confused. One of them, slightly smaller than the others, which still meant he was about half a foot taller than Holt, stepped forward. "You surrender?" he asked, his translator rendering his voice with undertones of suspicion. "I surrender," Holt confirmed, "but I want to see the hostages. That's non-negotiable." Behind her, Umbridge made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a prayer to whatever gods the Quellones believed in. The Kulgrim warriors, after a brief consultation in their own language that the translator didn't bother converting, nodded. They formed up around Holt, weapons trained on her, and began marching her through the station corridors. Umbridge followed at a discreet distance, datapad in hand, recording everything. They walked through sections of the station that Holt had never seen before. Emergency lighting cast everything in shades of red. Blast doors had sealed off entire sections. The evacuation was nearly complete. The corridors were empty, except for the occasional unconscious security officer who'd apparently tried to stop the Kulgrim and regretted it. Holt counted the warriors around her. 3 in front, 2 on each side, 1 behind. 8 total. All armed with weapons that could probably vaporize her in a fraction of a second. Except they couldn't, could they? Because she'd stopped a monomolecular blade. Because she'd jumped 15 feet and landed without injury. Because she was, according to Umbridge's frantic recalibration of the database, approximately 2.5 times as physically capable as any of these warriors had evolved to be. The thought didn't make her feel powerful. It made her feel terrified. They reached Docking Bay 12. The massive doors were open, revealing the interior where a mid-sized transport ship was docked. Around the ship, spread out in defensive positions, were the remaining Kulgrim warriors, and in the center of the bay, huddled together in a group that looked very small and very frightened, were the hostages. 23 beings. Holt counted them quickly. Most were adults, traders, tourists, station workers caught in the wrong place. But in the center of the group, clustered together and being protected by what looked like their teacher, were 6 youngsters. Children. Different species, but all clearly terrified. One of them, a small haxelite with pale green shell coloring, was crying. The sound was high-pitched and keening, cutting through the tension in the bay like a knife. Drakmoth stood near the hostages, his blade, the one Holt had stopped, held loosely in one hand. When he saw Holt enter, his expression went hard. "The Earthborn shows wisdom," he said, his voice echoing through the bay. "Kneel." Holt looked at the hostages, looked at the crying youngster, looked at the teacher, who was doing everything they could to comfort the children despite clearly being just as terrified. She looked back at Drakmoth. "Yeah, about that," she said, lowering her hands, but not kneeling. "I'm actually just here to take these people and leave." The temperature in the docking bay seemed to drop. Every Kulgrim warrior went still. Drakmoth's eyes widened, then narrowed. "You surrender," he said slowly, And then you make demands? You truly don't understand your situation, Earthborn. I understand it perfectly, Holt said, and was surprised by how calm her voice sounded. You're hunting someone, a political defector. I get it. But these people have nothing to do with that. They're innocent. So, I'm going to walk over there, and I'm going to take them to safety. And then you can continue your hunt. Everyone wins. And if we refuse? Drakmoth asked. Holt smiled. It wasn't a particularly warm smile. Then I guess we find out what happens when an unstoppable force meets a movable object. One of the warriors near her grabbed her arm, all four of his hands, wrapping around her bicep in a grip that was clearly meant to be painful and restraining. Holt looked down at the hands on her arm. Then she looked up at the warrior's face. I'm going to start walking now, she said pleasantly. You can let go, or you can come along for the ride. Your choice. She took a step forward. The warrior, all 400 pounds of him, didn't budge her. She took another step. He was trying. She could see the strain in his face, the way his muscles bunched under his armor. But he might as well have been trying to stop a freight train with a polite request. Let her go, Drakmoth ordered. The warrior released Holt's arm, stepping back with an expression that suggested his entire understanding of physics had just been called into question. Holt took another step toward the hostages. Then another. Two more warriors moved to intercept her. One tried to tackle her at the waist. He bounced off, stumbled backward, and sat down hard on the deck plating with a confused grunt. The other grabbed her from behind, all four arms wrapped around her torso in what was probably a technique that had worked on countless opponents in the past. Holt kept walking. The warrior's feet left the ground. He was being dragged along behind her like a particularly aggressive backpack. She said over her shoulder. This is really awkward for both of us. Do you want to maybe let go? The warrior let go, landing in a heap. Holt reached the hostages. The teacher, a tall, crystalline being whose species Holt didn't recognize, stared at her with something approaching religious awe. Hi, Holt said gently. I'm going to get you all out of here. Just stay close to me, okay? The crying Haxilite youngster looked up at her with huge, watery eyes. Are you a hero? No, Holt said honestly. I'm just someone who's really, really stubborn. Holt started ushering the hostages toward the docking bay exit. The teacher helped organize the youngsters into a group, whispering reassurances that everything would be okay now, that the nice Earthborn was going to help them. Holt really hoped the teacher was right about that. She'd made it maybe 10 feet when Drakmoth stepped into her path. You will not leave this bay, he said, and there was something in his voice. Not quite desperation, but close. Like his entire worldview was crumbling, and he was trying to hold it together through sheer force of will. I don't know what you are, Earthborn, but you will not humiliate the Kulgrim Third Hunting Fleet. I'm not trying to humiliate anyone, Holt said, keeping herself between Drakmoth and the hostages. I'm just trying to get innocent people to safety. There's no shame in that. There is shame, Drakmoth growled, in being defeated by prey. He lunged at her, not with his blade this time, but with all four arms extended in a grappling maneuver that probably had a very impressive name in Kulgrim martial arts. Holt didn't think. Her body just reacted. She sidestepped, grabbed one of his arms, gently, or what felt gentle to her, and redirected his momentum. Drakmoth went sailing past her, crashed into a cargo container with enough force to dent the reinforced metal, and slid to the ground. Sorry, Holt said automatically. Are you okay? Drakmoth stared at her from where he sat, breathing hard. How, he whispered, are you doing this? Honestly, I'm still figuring that out myself. The other warriors charged as a group, coordinated, professional. Exactly the kind of tactical assault that had probably won them countless battles across the galaxy. Holt picked up the nearest, youngling, the crying Haxilite, and held the child against her chest with one arm while using her other hand to, well, she wasn't entirely sure what to call it. Block? Redirect? Politely decline their attacks? A shock baton came at her head. She caught it with her free hand. The electrical charge that should have incapacitated her just tingled slightly. The warrior holding the other end of the baton pulled the trigger again, increasing the voltage. The baton sparked, smoked, and shattered. "These youngsters are scared enough already," Holt said, her voice taking on an edge she didn't recognize. "Can we, maybe not do this in front of the children?" Another warrior tried to sweep her legs. His arm hit her shin, and he yelped in pain, cradling what was probably a fractured limb. A third warrior produced some kind of net launcher. The net deployed, wrapped around Holt, and she shrugged it off like it was made of tissue paper, the reinforced cables snapping with sounds like breaking guitar strings. The Haxilite youngling in her arms had stopped crying. Now the child was watching the proceedings with wide-eyed fascination. "Are you magic?" the youngling asked. "No, sweetie," Holt said, setting the child down gently next to the other hostages. "I'm just from a really heavy planet." She turned back to the warriors. They'd regrouped, forming a defensive line between her and the exit. Drachmoth had recovered and rejoined them, his expression cycling through emotions faster than Holt could track. "I don't want to hurt any of you," Holt said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "I really, truly don't. But I am leaving here with these people. That's not negotiable." "You stopped my blade," Drachmoth said. "That weapon can cut through bulkheads. It can slice through Kulgrim bone plating. How did you stop it?" "I have no idea," Holt admitted. "But I did. And if you come at me with it again, I'll probably stop it again. And then we'll both feel awkward about it." One of the warriors whispered something to Drachmoth in their native language. Holt's translator caught fragments. "Death world. Database error. Gravity differential." Drachmoth's eyes widened. "Earth is a high-gravity world." "Apparently," Holt said. "News to me, honestly. I thought our gravity was normal." "Your normal is our extreme training environment," another warrior said, his voice hollow with realization. "We send our finest soldiers to high-gravity worlds to build strength. You people live there." "We also invented pizza and streaming television," Holt offered. "So, we're not all about the physical stuff." She started walking toward the exit again. The hostages clustered behind her like ducklings following their mother. The warriors didn't move to stop her this time. They just watched, weapons lowered, looking like people who'd just had their fundamental understanding of the universe completely rearranged. Holt was 5 feet from the exit when Drachmoth made his move. He was fast, faster than she'd expected, and he'd clearly decided that if overwhelming force wouldn't work, maybe precision would. He grabbed one of the youngsters, the small Haxilite child, and held his blade to the child's throat. The docking bay went absolutely silent. "Stop," Drachmoth commanded, "or the child dies." Holt stopped. Every muscle in her body went tense. The other hostages gasped, crying out in their various languages. Holt looked at Drachmoth, really looked at him, saw the desperation in his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly, the rigid set of his shoulders that spoke of someone making a play they didn't want to make, but felt they had no choice. "No," Holt said quietly. "You won't." "I am Kulgrim," Drachmoth said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We do not make empty threats." "You're also a warrior with a code of honor," Holt said, taking a step forward. The blade pressed slightly against the youngling's throat, but didn't break skin. "I pulled up the cultural database on your species during my freight runs. Read it while I was waiting for cargo transfers. Your people have rules, laws. You don't harm non-combatants. You don't kill children. It's literally in your genetic conditioning. Your species evolved honor codes into your psychology to prevent internal conflicts from destroying your civilization." Another step forward. "The entire galaxy is watching this on security feeds right now," Holt continued. "Every station in this sector has access to Ophiuchus 6's cameras. If you hurt that child, you won't just be breaking your own laws. You'll be proving that Kulgrim warriors can be forced to abandon their honor by a single unarmed human. Is that really the message you want to send?" Drakmoth's blade wavered. Holt took another step. Then another. "Let the child go," she said softly. "Please, you're better than this." For a long moment, nothing happened. The entire docking bay held its breath. Then Drakmoth lowered his blade. The youngling scrambled away, running to the teacher who scooped the child up in trembling arms. Holt let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. That's when Drakmoth attacked, not the child, but Holt herself. Full force, full speed, his blade coming at her throat with killing intent. Not a demonstration this time, not a warning. A genuine attempt to end her life. Holt's hand shot out. She caught the blade, one-handed this time, not even looking at it. Her eyes stayed locked on Drakmoth's face. "I don't want to fight you," she said. "I don't want to hurt anyone. But I am leaving here with these people." She squeezed. The monomolecular blade, the weapon that could cut through reinforced metals, that could slice through Kulgrim bone plating, that was one of the most advanced pieces of weapon technology in the known galaxy. Snapped between her fingers like a pretzel stick. Just broke. Clean fracture. 2 pieces. Holt dropped the broken blade. It clattered on the deck plating with a sound that seemed very loud in the sudden silence. Drakmoth stared at his ruined weapon. Then at Holt. Then he started laughing. Not angry laughter this time. Not mocking. Something closer to hysteria, or maybe enlightenment, or possibly the sound of someone's entire worldview shattering and reforming into something completely different. "Earthborn," he said between fits of laughter. "We flagged you as weak. We thought—" He couldn't finish. He was laughing too hard. The other warriors were backing away now, weapons holstered, hands raised in gestures that Holt's cultural database identified as Kulgrim signs of respect and submission. Holt helped the last hostage, an elderly Quellan who'd been too frightened to move, to their feet. "Come on," she said gently. "Let's get you out of here." She turned back to Drakmoth, who'd finally stopped laughing and was now just standing there, holding the broken pieces of his blade. "For what it's worth," Holt said. "On Earth, I'm actually pretty average. Maybe even below average. I failed my high school fitness test." The look on Drakmoth's face suggested she'd just broken something in his brain worse than she'd broken his blade. Holt led the hostages out of the docking bay, past the stunned Kulgrim warriors, through the station corridors that were starting to fill with returning security forces and curious onlookers. Behind her, she could hear Drakmoth say to his warriors, in a voice filled with something approaching existential dread, "There are billions of them. Billions of these Earthborn, and they don't even know what they are."